The air inside the Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, was thick with the scent of floor wax, stale tobacco, and the crushing arrogance of the law. It was March 3, 1934, a day that was supposed to be the final chapter of the John Dillinger saga. The authorities had bragged to every newspaper from Chicago to New York that this facility was escape-proof. They had surrounded the building with National Guard troops, placed machine gun nests on the roof, and boasted that even a ghost couldn't slip through their fingers. The sheriff, Lillian Holly, had inherited the job after her husband was killed in the line of duty, and she was determined to show the world that a woman could hold the most dangerous man in America. But as the morning sun began to bleed through the high, barred windows, she, and the rest of the world, was about to learn that you cannot cage a man who has already mastered the architecture of fear. John Dillinger sat in the bullpen, a common area for prisoners, looking less like a fugitive and more like a man waiting for a flight in a luxury lounge. His aura had reached a fever pitch. He had been captured in Arizona just weeks before, and his arrival in Indiana had been treated like a royal procession. He had posed for photos with the prosecutors, his arm draped casually over their shoulders, smiling with a magnetic charm that made the lawmen look like fawning fans rather than officers of the court. He understood the power of image. He knew that if he could win the room, he had already won the battle. While the guards gripped their Thompson submachine guns with white-knuckled intensity, Dillinger stood relaxed, humming a popular tune, his eyes scanning the room with the calculated precision of a master builder looking for a crack in the foundation. The crack wasn't in the walls, it was in the men. Dillinger had spent his weeks at Crown Point not plotting a violent breakout, but performing a psychological lobotomy on his captors. He chatted with them about baseball, shared jokes about the Depression, and treated the guards with a level of respect that made them lower their shields. They began to see him not as public enemy number one, but as Johnny, the likable rogue who just happened to be the world's most famous bank robber. They forgot the wolf was in the room because the wolf was wearing a tailored suit and a winning smile. This was the true power of his aura, the ability to make his enemies want to be his friends, but in the dark hours of the night, inside his cell, the smile vanished. In its place was a cold, mechanical focus. Dillinger knew that the charm would only take him so far. He needed a key, and if the guards wouldn't give him one, he would manufacture a reality that forced them to comply. This is where the legend of the wooden gun takes its place in the pantheon of American mythology. According to the most enduring version of the story, Dillinger had spent days meticulously carving a piece of wood, some say it was from a washboard, others say a bed rail, into the shape of a .38 caliber Colt semi-automatic. He used a razor blade to etch the fine details of the slide and the grip. To give it the weight of death, he supposedly used lead from a pencil or a piece of metal he had scavenged. Finally, he covered the entire thing in black shoe polish, buffing it until it had the dull, lethal glint of cold steel. The brilliance of the wooden gun wasn't in the carving, it was in the performance. A gun is only as dangerous as the person holding it, and Dillinger knew that his reputation would do 90% of the work. If anyone else held a piece of painted wood, the guards would laugh. But when John Dillinger pointed something black and metallic at you, your brain didn't look for wood grain, it looked for a way to stay alive. He was weaponizing his own myth. He was turning the headlines and the FBI posters into a physical force. Around 9:30 a.m., the play began. Dillinger approached a guard named Sam Cahoon. He didn't rush him. He didn't shout. He simply moved into the guard's personal space, the aura of the predator suddenly flaring to life. The casual, friendly Johnny was gone. In his place was the man who had leaped over bank counters and outrun the law across 5 states. He pressed the cold, black muzzle of the gun into Cahoon's ribs. "Don't make a sound, Sam," Dillinger whispered, his voice as sharp and steady as a surgeon's scalpel. "I don't want to kill you, but I will if I have to." "Give me the keys." Cahoon froze. He felt the weight of the object against his side. He looked into Dillinger's eyes and saw a void of absolute certainty. In that moment, the escape-proof jail evaporated. The machine guns on the roof, the National Guard troops in the courtyard, none of it mattered because the man in the room had the gun. Cahoon handed over the keys. Dillinger didn't stop there. He began to move through the facility with a terrifying, quiet efficiency. He rounded up the other guards. the trustees, and even a few maintenance workers, herding them into a cell like sheep. One by one, the men who were supposed to be the guardians of justice were brought low by a piece of wood. It was the ultimate humiliation. Dillinger wasn't just escaping, he was performing a satirical play at the expense of the American legal system. He eventually gathered nearly 30 hostages, all of them convinced they were seconds away from being mowed down by a high-caliber weapon. He even took a real Thompson submachine gun from the jail's own army once he had the keys, finally trading his wooden prop for the real thing. He reportedly tossed the wooden gun toward a group of cowering guards and laughed. A sound that would haunt their careers until the day they died. "See you in the movies, boys," he supposedly said, a line so cinematic it felt scripted, but the escape was only half the story. To get away, he needed a car. He didn't pick a random vehicle, he walked straight to the garage and took the sheriff's personal car, a brand new, black Ford the 5.8. It was the fastest car on the road, the Bonnie and Clyde Special, a machine built for the high-speed chases that had defined the era. He forced the deputy and a mechanic to come with him as hostages to ensure a clean exit from the town. As the Ford the 5.8 roared to life, Dillinger did something that perfectly encapsulated his flamboyant, defiant spirit. As they sped away from their escape-proof jail, leaving a trail of dust and shattered reputations behind them, he began to sing. He didn't sing a song of anger or hatred. He sang The Last Roundup, a popular cowboy ballad of the time. He was a man who had just pulled off the greatest heist in history, and he was treating it like a Sunday drive. He chatted with his hostages, apologizing for the inconvenience and even offering them cigarettes. He was maintaining the law even in the midst of a felony. However, it was during this high-speed getaway that Dillinger made the one mistake that would ultimately lead to the Biograph Theater. In his excitement, he drove the stolen car across the state line into Illinois. Up until that moment, John Dillinger was largely a state problem. He was an Indiana thief, an Ohio robber, a local nuisance. But by driving a stolen vehicle across a state line, he violated the National Motor Vehicle Theft Act, also known as the Dyer Act. This was a federal offense. This single act gave J. Edgar Hoover and the Bureau of Investigation, soon to be the FBI, the legal jurisdiction they had been dreaming of. It transformed Dillinger from a local fugitive into a federal target. The full weight of the United States government was now officially authorized to hunt him down, regardless of state borders. The wooden gun had set him free from Crown Point, but the Ford the 5.8 had locked him into a collision course with the federal government. The news of the escape hit America like a thunderclap. The Great Depression was at its bleakest, and the public, tired of being squeezed by banks and ignored by politicians, cheered for the man who had made a fool out of the system with nothing but a piece of wood. He became a folk hero overnight. The wooden gun became a symbol of the little guy outsmarting the big machine. But for J. Edgar Hoover, it was a personal insult. He ordered his top agent, Melvin Purvis, to assemble a Dillinger squad. The mandate was simple: don't bring him back. End him. The Crown Point escape was the peak of Dillinger's aura. It was the moment he proved that the law was a paper tiger and that his spirit was untamable. But it also stripped away his anonymity forever. He could no longer hide in the shadows of local corruption. He was now the face of public enemy number one. Every police officer in the country was now looking for that V8, and every phone line was being tapped. The wooden gun itself disappeared into history, becoming a relic that many claimed to own but few could prove. Was it really wood? Or was it a smuggled real gun that the guards claimed was wood to save their own reputations? The truth doesn't matter as much as the impact. The myth of the wooden gun did more damage to the authority of the law than 1,000 real bullets ever could. It showed that the system was built on the perception of power, and once that perception was shattered by a bit of carving and some shoe polish, the system was vulnerable. Dillinger's life after Crown Point was a frantic, high-stakes blur of narrow escapes and increasing violence. He was a man living on borrowed time, and he knew it. He had humiliated the law so thoroughly that they could never allow him to live. The law that had saved him in the Lake County jail was now a beacon that drew the hunters closer every day. As he drove toward Chicago, the wind whipping through the open windows of the stolen Ford, Dillinger must have felt invincible. He had done the impossible. He had walked out of a fortress with a toy. He was the king of the outlaws, and for a brief, shining moment, the entire world was his. But in the rearview mirror, the shadow of the federal government was beginning to grow, a dark cloud that no amount of charm or wooden props could ever dispel. The Crown Point escape wasn't just a prison break, it was a declaration of war. It was the day John Dillinger told the world that he would rather die as a legend than live as a prisoner. And in that narrow, grease-stained alleyway of the American psyche, he remains there still, grinning, holding a piece of wood, and waiting for the next person to tell him that something is impossible. The Laura of Crown Point is the aura of the trickster, the rebel, and the man who refuses to accept the bars that society places around him. It is a story that reminds us that sometimes, the most powerful weapon you can carry isn't made of steel, but of imagination and the sheer, unadulterated guts to use it. Would you like to continue the journey into the ghost of Little Bohemia, the night the FBI lost control, or should we explore the dark psychological toll of his new-faced surgery?